Yep, that's me looking at the preview results. Oh man, oh man. Okay. Now, for real this time, because streams are actually at 8 p.m. instead of 7, because I keep forgetting that I'm not on Central Time anymore. And there's the new puzzle announcement. Right, I also need to give y'all the start solve. Alrighty, I'm gonna go download these solutions while we banter, or something like that. Any questions on the round 8 puzzle? Can I take that as a no? Alright. Yeah, the solutions are a little bit earlier on stream than they are on the Discord. Alright, so quick puzzle explanation while we wait. So, this puzzle is called Modernizing Electronics. Why is it called Modernizing Electronics? Because the input is silicon, which is the basis of pretty much almost all modern integrated circuits. There are some newer technologies that they're trying to branch out that are not silicon, but they're still kind of in their infancy. And these, silicon carbide and graphene, are two of those newfangled semiconductors that people are trying to get working right now. Silicon carbide is almost like diamond. It's very hard, but actually really nice for use in some power applications. And graphene is just kind of crazy. So how does in terms of Spacechem though, we're probably more interested in the not really the chemistry aspect, but more the atomic numbers. Now, silicon here is number 14, and oxygen here is number 8. And some very interesting things that I don't know if anyone noticed, but there's actually a ratio of 2 to 1 of these inputs. I did this because at the very, very beginning, this was meant to be a cycles puzzle. If you do the math, if you do the math, the oxygen is actually enough to make this the output ratios be precise. Let me see here if I can just do that math again real quick. So 14 times 16 is 224, and the oxygen here is going to be plus 32. So that's 256 atomic mass in total. If you count graphene, that's going to be 6 times 16, which is 96. And then this thing here is going to be 20 times 8. Times 8, which is 160. If you add that to 96, you also get 256. So that was the... that's why these things are balanced in 1 to 2. Of course, actually getting to that speed is, I would say it's no small feat. I'm not even sure if it's possible, mostly because the assembling process of this is messy. Yeah, because these are blocks. There's echoes of a earlier puzzle, I think 2019, called Mean Sheets, which was outputting like one giant 4x8 block of cobalt, and your inputs were 2 sheets, 4x4 of nitrogen and carbon. And this has echoes of it because if you decide to do this in fewer reactors, you also have to mess with working with blocks all over the place. So that was one of the main inspirations / challenges for this puzzle. And the other one is just fusion fission stuff. But the fusion fission stuff in this puzzle wasn't that terribly complicated. So without further ado, let's start looking at these puzzles. So whoever 314 is up first. And we'll see there's a few there's a few commonalities that you'll notice pretty quickly. So one of them is you can strip silicon into single atoms like this. Although I will probably say it might be a better idea for red to hammer on bond minus and then blue to do output on this row. That way you can always stall on this and you don't need to have all of these delay commands. And then, all right, let's take a look at this reactor. So this reactor, all it's doing is it's making carbon, and how it's doing it is that it's fusing oxygens 3 times, because 3 times 8 will get you 24, and then that will split to 12, and then that 12 will split to 6. Yeah. So these 2 reactors, pretty self-explanatory. Now we want to take a look at the other 2. This one is the one that makes the graphene. And this is relatively simple. input beta, and then bond plus, and then the next one. So it makes C shapes before it essentially, yeah, drops it off over here, makes another C shape. A couple of flip-flops to do this, and then right there, drop bond plus and then output, and that gets you your sheet of graphene. Over here, so the way that this reactor is working is that there's a steady stream of silicon atoms on the bottom here, and then there's a steady stream of carbon atoms, but over here, and the walls alternate in bonding into these little silicon copper like 2-atom things, and it assembles it. Yep, strip by strip, block by block. Overall, it works. Yeah, so this is 144 symbols, and because extra reactors are penalized here at a rate of 20 symbols per reactor, this means that this actually scores 204. Coming up next, Astro Nelson. Now we're going to take a look at this one. So Astro Nelson does other things a little differently with chopping this into strips of silicon. And this reactor is kind of more like 2 half reactors in one. Because this alpha is going to this psi, this beta is going to this omega, and it's always like that, which is rather clever. And what's interesting is this. So there's some complicated fission stuff going on here. This reactor, all it's doing is making beryllium from this oxygen. That's all it's doing. Yep. And it's also, well, also splitting it down here. So this part here, let's take a look at this in a little bit more depth. So 14 divided by 2 is 7, plus 4 becomes 11. But 11, if you split that, will get you carbon, so 6 plus 5. So that's where it's getting its carbon from. And then similarly, if you take this 5 over here and you fuse that into 7, you'll get 12, which is just 2 times 6. So that makes this, and it alternates folding it either left or right, so you get alternating sticks here. And in that case, what happens is you save a lot of manipulation here, because you can just bond and unbond, or sorry, you can just bond here without having to rotate these, and that saves a lot of like area usage in this reactor, because this top reactor is busy doing this silicon crystal crap. Yeah. And then over here, so this reactor is actually rather fascinating, because you have this leftover beryllium from that oxygen, and then you have this weird input of nitrogen and carbon. Yeah, so there's some tricky business to be done here, but essentially it's doing 4 plus 7 is 11, and then that gets you 6 plus 5, and that 5 plus another 7 gets you another C, or another carbon. So what it's doing is 4 plus 7, let's see if this is right, 4 plus 7 plus 7, yeah. So that gets you 18, which is exactly 3 carbons. Math. Fusion and fission math is honestly one of the favorite things, well, one of my favorite things in Spacechem. But yeah, this is how this solution works. Overall, it is better, but there is definitely a lot of symbols used to get this thing to work. Getting this 4 and 2 nitrogens, the beryllium and the 2 nitrogens to make the 3 carbons, that is a little bit clunky. And I feel like this bonding process might be better, but I'm not sure. But yes, 131 symbols for a score of 191. Astro Nelson in 10th place. UK Atomic Energy. Yeah, that's okay. This puzzle is rather difficult, I will say that. UK Atomic Energy Agency, which is, oh boy, this team, let me see if I can remember. Oh boy. I've forgotten who is in this team. Oh boy. So there are 2 teams this year. Light Speed is Too Slow and UK Atomic Energy Agency. If I can remember, I know I had to have let's see here. Keep scrolling up. Teams. Ah, right. One of the big issues with this is the bot actually doesn't take in like usernames. Instead, it takes in like ID numbers. But yes, it is Britboy, Jojo, and Mattermonkey. Alrighty, so let's take a look. This one, pretty self-explanatory. Strips off silicons into a single atom stream. And again, you can output stall. Over here, helium and carbon. Interesting. But you might notice there's a lot of pipe. So that's because this carbon here actually fills up, and it's not making this in the ratios are not like perfect in this solution, so it ends up filling up this reactor first. And I believe with how this reactor is designed, if this carbon backlog actually gets over here, it might crash. So that's always fun. Yeah, because there's no synchronization between the blue and the red here, which is interesting. So carbon, silicon, we've seen this before, except this time it's doing the stick building inside here, and it's doing the rotation inside of this reactor by itself. And then over here, we have this. So 3 heliums get 2 carbon. And there's some fancy synchronization going on here. This here is actually a 3 count because it passes this synchronize once and then twice on the way back down and then the 3rd time on the way back up. Flip-flop, yeah. And then we've got this thing going on here. This does seem a little bit symbol heavy, I will mention that. Let's take a look at what exactly it's doing and why it needs... Oh. Ah. Interesting. That will definitely make things more complicated if you make your product wrong and then you have to fix it later. It is something, very much something you can do though, but you can see there's a lot of symbols used here to get that to fix it up, unfortunately. Yeah, it's definitely making a lot more of this output than the second output. And if you run it, it fills the world up with garbage, and it works. 89 symbols, quite a bit lower than the previous solution. That's for a score of 149. 4 reactors, 89 symbols. Now, Yellow Bunny is up next. Another one of these. We've seen plenty of these already. This is going to be a recurring theme. Now this, we're actually not going to look at quite now. This is where things are more interesting. Now that is a very clever way of making a lot of carbons in a pretty simple reactor. So this, what's going on over here is a, how do I say this? This is kind of like a 3 count flip-flop. So it's more like a 1.5 count flip-flop. Yeah. This counter here is a little bit weird because this flip-flop runs every other time, and this runs every 4th time. It skips the next beta input. Yeah, this is a little bit weird. But what it does, as you can see, is that it's making chromium, which is 24, and that will split very nicely down to 4 carbons. And this reactor is set up in a way that it'll hit the split once to split 24 into 12, and then the next time it splits, it gets you all the carbons, and then just output all of them. This is actually a really clever reactor. Now, where do all these carbons go, and what do they do? Well, this is the assembly for the graphene, making these C shapes or U shapes. And then it turns out that this here, this little wiggle shape, you can actually make 2 of them. And then once you've made 2 of these, you can actually just bond them together. Let's take a look at this final C shape. And there you go. And the only thing that's left to do is bond and bond that. Very nice. Yeah, there's a use of this sensor in the corner to trip this a second time to use this bond, and then there's an output right here. Then lastly, there's this reactor. Silicon, carbon, and what do they do? Stick building, and you can see here are the two rotates. One to go continue downwards, and the other one to rotate the other way. And this will make a block of 4. And this grab here will make it drop into this corner and output. Very nice. Very nice. Right. So there's an interesting use of the sensor here, where it's sensing for carbon instead of using a flip-flop, because this reactor sometimes will run through this when there's nothing on it. It is rather curious. So, at the end of the day, 84 symbols. 5 symbols less, and a little bit faster at 26,000 cycles. And that is 8th place, Yellow Bunny. Coming up next, Anime. So this is our first, and actually our only, 3-reactor solution. Now, cutting down on reactors is where things get really complicated, because you need to do more stuff in fewer reactors. And reactor space is at a premium because of these crazy big inputs. So let's take a look at what goes on. Alrighty. We've got this. And that is a carbon. And another carbon. And that is a 3-count flip-flop to output more carbon. Yeah, so red splits twice, which will get you 4 plus 2, which is a carbon. And blue will count 3 times, because the leftover helium will get fused 3 times to get another carbon. Now, it's interesting that that Anime has decided to do this kind of split with the outputs. I'm very curious of what happens with that. So, now this is a monster of a reactor. Making a block from 2 blocks, or rather, making a block from another block in the same reactor like this. I think this is the first time we've seen this. A lot of important space management. So we've got silicon being stripped off one by one, and this flip-flop decides which of these 2 it's supposed to go to. Every time it only inputs 1 alpha, so it alternates and never crashes. And then blue has this silicon sensor for sensing for the input of the next block. Very, very nice. Now this reactor down here, it's going to be a slow one. All right. Oops, I missed it. All right. Let's see. Here we go. So this will bond to make this U shape as usual. Red will stall on this input. And it's making these squiggly half sheets. And come on. One more. There we go. And when this happens, you get 2 squiggly sheets and some bond plus drop. Since this next one comes by. sync, or rather this next input alpha. Yeah, note that the watercolors actually cannot be swapped here because it relies on red inputting this alpha before blue can get the go ahead. Yeah, so bond plus drop, and then another bond plus here, and then an output. That's very nice reusing of symbols. That's very efficient. And I like this input stalling. The only problem is, well, synchronize commands. Yeah, I'm not sure if that can be avoided for this solution. But nevertheless, this is a very nice solution. At 95 symbols, it does make the top a little bit more. That's a recurring theme, because if you split the carbons evenly, then you can make 2 outputs of the silicon carbide per every 1 output of the graphene. So because, well, even though it's 11 more symbols, because this is 1 less reactor, this actually scores lower than Yellow Bunny's solution at 135. Coming up next is Tough Thought. 2 reactors. So yes, 6 people, or rather 6 entities, managed to get a 2 reactor solution. 1 reactor solutions are theoretically possible, but they're I don't think they're competitive. But yes, here is Tough Thought's solution, and let's take a look at this one first. Yep. Carbon, carbon. Yeah, so this just turns this oxygen stream into a steady stream of carbons, which means it's this reactor where everything interesting is happening. So let's start from the beginning and take a look, because, oh boy. This is where the mean sheets analogy really starts to be apparent. Yeah, so you've got silicon carbide being made here. And then blue is being held on a sync command, and once it does this, it will, I believe, blue goes and makes the graphene. So the reason why this is 107 symbols is because this reactor is incredibly complicated. Let's see if we can... All the work is being done by one Waldo alone, and that's another reason why this might be a little bit more complicated than it should be. Mostly because it means that the red Waldo cannot help with the blue Waldo, and vice versa when they're making these sheets. And let me skip through this. Alrighty, input Bravo, or beta. Doing more. So that's a stick of carbon. And then here's another stick of carbon. There's a 4-count flip-flop right here. Ah, yes. So it is doing, it's constructing these like so. And then it's dropping. And then here we go. 1, 2, drop, output, clean. Yeah, and you've got these synchronized commands to get this. Yeah, so blue does all the graphene building, red does all of the silicon carbide building. All of this in one reactor is very nice, but unfortunately it is a lot of symbols. Runs decently fast though. For 40,000 cycles. Decently fast for a 2-reactor solution. We'll see that the 2-reactor solutions, they don't actually get much faster than... they don't get too much below 20,000 cycles. But at the end of the day, 107 symbols, but 2 reactors means that this is 127 metric. And that is 6th place. 5th place, Binky. Alrighty. So this first reactor is really 2 half reactors. You've got this carbon generator over here, and you've got this silicon stream thing going on over here. We've seen this plenty of times before, so let's go on and look at the second reactor. Now this reactor, okay, makes a silicon carbide. But over here you can see that both red and blue are helping each other out. Now what I'm rather interested in is the graphene construction. So once this is done, there's a bunch of there's a bunch of sensors that will trigger this to happen. Drop output, and then yep. So red is helping out with timed bond commands, and blue over here makes the graphene. And if you alternate dropping at these 2 locations, you can... Oh, I see. So it's not actually doing... I originally thought that it was using this arrow to drop and set the drop point at different places. But I think what's actually happening is this red flip-flop here is actually changing the timing of the bonds, which is actually very clever. Yeah, and this drop there. Very nice. So that, yeah, makes the output 1-to-1. And 2 reactors, 105 symbols, just 2 symbols less. You might be wondering like why this doesn't stall the previous reactor, and that's because this is really just 2 half reactors. There's no dependence on this output from this output, so it will always run. Now this reactor is a little bit symbol heavy for what it is, which is why even though this assembly reactor is less complicated than ToughSots, it's still roughly the same symbol count, unfortunately. Yep, so this comes in at a little bit over 20,000 cycles, which is roughly twice as fast. 105 symbols for a score of 125. 5th place. Now we're headed to 4th place, which is Darius 1. Alright, so that's a silicon stream. We've seen this. Now, what is red doing down here? I think that's also a carbon stream. That's rather clever. This flip-flop here to take care of this waste handling. That's rather nice. Alright, so carbon stream, silicon stream. Now, both of them go to this reactor. Now let's take a look from the beginning. Okay, I guess it Yeah, I guess the startup takes a little while. Yeah. Alright, so there's a carbon input. Makes a silicon carbide stick. And then another silicon carbide stick. So that's going to be making silicon carbide output. Now, my question is, how does it make the carbon thing? So once this thing outputs, it will go through... So there's actually two separate loops going on here. And this silicon here is done so that this reactor doesn't stall, because that one does couple the carbon and silicon streams together. Yep, and there we go, and it keeps going. One thing that is actually really surprising to me is that these are both like 1.5 Waldo solutions for each reactor, aka you have a Waldo that runs into a wall. This is done so that this split can output this carbon and it turns this into a single atom stream, which is rather convenient because you only have one grab point here. Or rather, here. Yeah, the part that is rather interesting to me is... So there's a 4 counter here, and then this... okay. That's neat. This sensor, this silicon sensor here, I believe is what actually... Yeah, that's what actually trips this output. That's clever. Yeah. So 2 reactors, 17,000 cycles, so slightly faster. 93 symbols, which is a bit of a jump down from Binky's previous solution of 105. But yes. It's, yeah, rather fascinating that this is 2 almost 1 Waldo reactors joined together. Coming up next is light speed is too slow, which is GG Gall and Big Mango Head. And this is another one of those solutions. Now, this is the first solution that we've seen where one of the reactors here creates the graphene and another reactor creates the silicon carbide for a 2-reactor solution. Now, the advantage of this is you don't have to worry as much about if you're trying to build both of these at the same time, you'll run into a lot of space issues with these sheets crashing into each other. If you split this work into 2 different reactors, though, you don't have the space issue, and both reactors could theoretically be simpler because both reactors can help each other out with the construction. So let's take a look at this reactor first, which I'm pretty sure is just, yep, a carbon stream. Yep, I'll fuse into chromium and split into a carbon stream. And that is one way of making the graphene. Yeah, again, space issues, so... Let's take a look at this last one. Yep. Very nice. Now, this carbon stream up here. So let's start this reactor from the beginning. Now, red Waldo on bond minus is interesting because, yeah, so recall that red always executes its command first. So blue on this bond plus is able to bond without problems. And then, of course, we have to wait until this carbon stream actually gets to this reactor. Yeah, so that's input, grab, bond plus, drop. And there's a typewriter mechanism here, which is once it reaches this end of the row, it'll grab this and drop it up here. So this flip-flop here is what determines whether or not this grabs a silicon or carbon. So let's grab bond plus, input alpha, there we go. Now it goes to grab another silicon. And that is an interesting thing. This carbon sensor is what flips this parity, so it goes carbon silicon instead of forwards. Right, and this flip-flop here, it runs more often than it should, but it's a hanging flip-flop so that it can reset this sheet when it gets to the end. And then input alpha, then getting close to the end here. Now, this silicon sensor will trip when this sheet is finished, and because you need two of these, or you make two of these for every one of these inputs, because this is half silicon, you just do a single flip-flop here to input the next sheet. Very, very nice. So overall, 89 symbols, of course filling the world up with garbage, with carbon garbage as usual. And that will get you, let's see here, third place, 89 symbols for a metric of 109. 15,700 cycles is actually the fastest of the two reactor solutions, but two people managed to score below this, being Rezuns and Andy. Congratulations on third place, firstly. And, here is where we start to see the cheese. Yes, you can do this. You could make everything from one output. There was nothing stopping you. There was nothing stopping you from doing this. It is a symbols puzzle after all. And if you decided that it was simpler to make silicon out of this oxygen input, you could have done that. Alrighty. Alright. Let's start this again so we can take a look at what exactly is happening. So, a lot of flip-flop priming to save on symbols. Input beta here. Split twice to get carbon. So that makes a carbon stick here. This oxygen. Let's take a look at what that does. That's two oxygens. Oxygen plus carbon is silicon. What do you know? 6 plus 8 is also 14. Yes. So we've got carbon sticks here, and we've got silicon carbide sticks there coming in, and all that's really left to do is just, well, put them together. So this is a line loop to bond this silicon carbide. It's pretty clever. Yeah, so this does all the bonding here, drop, and then once it gets on the sensor, that's where, yeah, it does this. Grab, drop, output, clean. Well, that is how you get to 82 symbols, 7 symbols fewer with 2 reactors, but there is one more solution that is ahead of everyone else. First, congratulations on second place, Resumes, on a very clever solution. 16,000, also decently fast. And Andy is at 52 symbols. Oh boy. Same approach of only using the oxygen input. And that's a lot of flip-flop priming. Alrighty. So with this primed already, that's a very clever use of this, because this would, yeah, on the second go, it doesn't do anything. Rotate, or rather, it fuses that second oxygen in already, so you don't have this hanging. Split, split, fuse. Wow. And then it'll go back up, grab this magnesium, split that to get your 2 carbons, and then that's going to make your silicon carbide. That is very, very clean. Yeah. Not entirely sure what to say other than this is essentially genius at work. I'm still rather curious about how it makes this. It's a very interesting way of building the silicon carbide. It's building in spirals. That's very curious. I didn't know that you could do this. But I suppose, yeah. Yeah, because all you need is an alternating stream of silicon and carbon, which is already being generated by this part here. And it'll miss this grab when it hits the edge of the spiral. Otherwise, it'll rotate back and correct for it. That is very clever. Yep, and here's the last one. So grabs over here, drop, output. And then this thing continues. Alrighty, let's take a look at this one. Yep. So input alpha, bond plus, grab, right. So it loops through this twice now. Yeah, so it makes this kind of weird comb shape thing, and then it'll continue to make this comb shape thing, and then this little line here will correct for this misshaped output. If I can get to there. Here we go. So grab, I'll bond plus these two, bond minus, drop and output. Now this reactor is obviously very, very simple. Still a couple of innovations in here to assemble this using multiple loops of this input alpha. And with this bonder layout, that will work. Yeah, this reuse of this grab and this drop is... There's a reason why Andy is in first place. It's because he comes up with stuff like this where... yeah. It's not just like one like innovation that other people didn't see. It's like 2 or 3 or 4 stacked on top of each other. And yeah, this is a very well-deserved first place. A metric of 72. For reference, the previous second place metric is 102, so literally 30 metric above. Very, very impressive first place, and congratulations to Andy for taking home the trophy for this puzzle. Really don't know what to say other than I'm very impressed. Unfortunately, it is a little bit slow because of that first reactor at almost 40,000 cycles. But yeah, 52 symbols. Incredible. Incredible work. Now we have one non-scoring solution by Yellow Bunny. Which is a single Waldo, but okay. If it's 4 reactors, is it still single Waldo? That's the real question, because this puzzle is theoretically doable in 1 reactor. And I did not receive a 1 reactor solution. So if anyone wants to try doing this puzzle in 1 reactor and you also using a single Waldo, be my guest. I'm not sure if that is possible. If it is, it will be very, very difficult. But yes. Silicon stream. Carbon stream. Yep. And this is, yeah, building the graphene. And this is, yeah, building the silicon carbide. This was really just 4 Waldos. But yes. Alright, that should be it for week 6 results. Week 5 results have not been published yet because I was busy in Vancouver last week visiting family, and I have so far have not had a chance to go and make fusion fission charts for week 5. I will be making flowcharts for how the fusion math and fission math works for week 5, because that puzzle is a lot more mathematically complicated than this one. And that should be it. Well, thank you everyone for coming for the stream. Thank you everyone for participating on the stream. Participating in the tournament. And yeah, we will see you all next week for the Dark Side of Cernimere 4, which is a rather interesting and curious puzzle. All right. Goodbye, everyone.